So let's get right into it. We're going to talk today about communicating beyond zeros and ones. That's the theme. And my name is Catherine Brinkman. So, looking at the value of the applications, when you really think about it, when I asked you the question, was there anything that you wish you could have done and assigned to someone else? Was there a task that you had that you wish you could have assigned to someone else? Because that is where you could then end up focusing on those critical thinking pieces. That's the fun part of people's job. Typing things in, data entry, it's not always glamorous, it's needed, but that's where AI and ML can come in and just make sure that your people are more focused on the external clients as well as internal so you have a more cohesive, embraced company. Also, why do you want to go ahead and use AI and ML applications? You're going to have fewer. I say fewer because there are errors, it is tech. But when you use automation, historically, there's zero errors. So there's no people getting called out in terms of them not doing a process correctly. Maybe there's somebody new that needs to get ramped up quickly, and all of a sudden, oh, hey, I have some RPA there to sit and help me. Then that makes my workload that much easier. My concepts within the new position I might be in, I can focus then on what are the things I need to think about to make sure I execute that process correctly. And then, of course, when we're selling the value, because you're being more customer focused, that only helps improve your NPS, your CSAT, and your VOC scores, which ultimately goes ahead and gives you more market share. And it would be really easy, right? If we didn't have to talk to people. It's the people part that sometimes makes our job confusing, frustrating. That's where we get disengaged. So, being able to really know who we're talking to and why it's important. So within Dale Carnegie, we have those four different personality styles where we have the analytical, we have the driver, we have somebody that's amiable and friendly, and then we have the expressor. So when we have those drivers, that's usually like the sales manager. Those are the salespeople that might promise something on the software side that's on the roadmap, and sometimes maybe it's 2 to 3 years out. I've done a lot of work with engineers in Silicon Valley on sales training. And ultimately, I've come across so many salespeople that are way ahead of where the roadmap is to where the analytical and the engineers are, right? So being able to really communicate together, to have those engineers sit and say, hey, wait a minute, we're working on ABC right now. You're already talking about XYZ. Where we also have those folks that are amiable. So we want to make sure that they are comfortable with new technology. They're comfortable sharing their ideas, voicing their concerns. And then we have the expressor. That's usually someone that loves the technology. Ultimately, they probably don't care about the ins and outs. They don't care about the zeros and ones that make it work. They're not going to care about the hardware. The expressors just want it to work. So how are we able to really talk to that person in that level? And really, it comes down to establishing and building rapport, spending time with that person, perhaps one on one, maybe even having a Zoom. I know a lot of us are back in the office, but it's more hybrid. So, having those conversations face to face on Teams, FaceTime, on Zoom, on this same platform that we're using now, just being able to see each other's body language while still on camera, and then being able to use appropriate language and pace based on the speaker prior. I love technology. Again, born and raised in Silicon Valley. I love it. I don't understand a lot of it. I understand just enough to be dangerous. So I leave the tech talk to certain individuals when it comes high level. So when I was an SME, I became an SME on robotic process automation as well as that account executive, just because they taught me enough to demo and run those proof of concepts because I could communicate. But ultimately, when it got to a certain level, I did not have the technology. They tried to teach it to me. And finally, I just said, you know what? I'm not an engineer. You're using words I don't understand. Take it, please. So that was one of the ways that myself as a driver was able to communicate tactfully with my analyticals and say, you know what, you're better than I am at this. Please take it. That allowed me to be much more comfortable with my client, focus more on my client, and then ultimately really be able to read them and do my quote unquote sales people job. And then also coach my analytical engineers on, okay, how do we build stronger rapport and take some of that fear out of this new technology? We have to be able to listen. The highest level of listening is empathetic. So we're not on our phone, we're not multitasking. When I say we're not on our phone, I am someone that does take notes on my phone. I always tell the person that I'm in front of, if I am going to take notes on my phone, hey, I'm not texting anybody, full undivided attention. Ultimately, I'm just taking notes. Same thing that I say if I'm online, taking or on a Zoom, on a call, whatever. When I'm taking notes on my computer, I type pretty heavy. So I always let them know I'm not emailing, I'm taking notes on our conversation. So making sure that we're able to listen to people, be in the moment, be mindful of what we're saying really goes a long way, because then we want to be able to bridge to the generations, right? We have the boomers, we have Gen X, we have millennials, we have Gen Z. I'm a vintage, I'm a 79 vintage, and I'm not a millennial and I'm not a Gen X. I'm a Zennial. So even within what we say generations by categories, people view themselves differently. And when we start to talk about how do we get people across generations to embrace the new releases and go ahead and let those legacy products go into the sunset, think of it this way. Think of the boomers and music, right? They had radio, they had TV, they had concerts, they had to be in person for those concerts, and they had vinyl. And then you go to Gen X. Concerts still there, still vinyl. Then all of a sudden you had 8 tracks. Then you had cassettes. And then you go to the millennials where you had tapes, and all of a sudden you had CDs. And then you have Gen Z where they may sit and think like, what's a CD? Everything's on the cloud. And the reason I say this is in college, when I first went away to UCLA, I had one of those huge rubber made tubs, those like 15-gallon full of CDs. I had over 1,000 CDs. And by the end of graduating college, I had over 2,000 songs on my iPod. If you told me freshman year that all of a sudden I would be able to have all kinds of music on this small little device, I would have said, no way. And now it's on the cloud. I don't ever buy CDs anymore. I just download things from the cloud. I buy them once in a while. Ultimately, I have a subscription. Where Gen Z, they already grew up with the cloud and having that capability. Whereas I think of my nephew who's 5, he just says, hey, Alexa, play this, and it's automatic and instantaneous. So thinking of just the changes of where the boomers were and respecting that, because all of a sudden you'll notice Gen Z starting to buy vinyl again. So things come back in style. And also when I work with some companies that are larger and they have people from all of these generations, what I've noticed is once in a while there's not a lot of respect for the people that are the boomers. And I just think, wow, these are the folks that had punch cards. And I don't know about you, but I am a fast typer and I make mistakes. And I just sometimes think when I'm hearing their stories, wow, I would have been fired immediately, because if you make one mistake on that punch card, it's finished. You have to start over, right? Whereas Gen X had a typewriter. You could use whiteout. You had the ribbon where you could back up and also retype over it. And then millennials, I grew up using Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing. And when I look at Gen Z, some of them I can't read their handwriting anymore. So it's just how do we change so much to respect across those generations? And a big piece of that comes to attitude. So we have to be able to have the right attitude to embrace diversity that comes with all of the things that our people have to offer. And then also we want to have the knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge that goes into what a punch card used to look like. Floppy disks. There's a lot that goes into it. There's also a lot of knowledge between understanding how things get to the cloud, redundancy. When you start talking about AWS versus Azure, open AI, there's so many different things are happening so quickly that it's hard to keep up. So listening to the boomers gives you that mindset of, okay, they went through this change. Think of where they started, where they are now. They have so much knowledge. I need to tap into this. So again, you're showing that respect. You're getting them, to the boomers and the Gen X, to start think about legacy. looking at the younger generations to think, wow, they've had a lot of change too. And look, they're able to do things faster. They're able to have more room within the cloud to store things that used to take a whole room, right? Also, when you start to think about knowledge, when we look at cloud based, you can get it anywhere. I don't have to sit behind a computer in my home. I can have it on my iPhone or whatever mobile device you use, and I can be in the moment with a client if there is an outage or if there is a question. We couldn't do that a few years ago. Now it's just commonplace. And that's where the skill comes in. And again, when we look at these generations, Gen Z grew up on computers. They're the screen generation, right? I say Zennials are as well. And I know that where I grew up in the Valley, it's very tech and cutting edge. I've met a lot of people recently that are under 40, that 35 to 40 range, and they're almost all screen based too from a young age. So it just depends on where you're at. And that comes into diversity and the generation, as well as where you're at in an education level, where you're at when it comes to your geography, and then also just what is your attitude? Do you like tech? And some of the ways you can actually bridge these generations is having a positive attitude about those that are on your team, really focusing on what stories do you like about them? What are some assets that everybody has that they bring to the table, and actually show interest. And then also know your own generation. I know, again, for example, I'm a Zennial, and the way that we communicate sometimes is really fast. We use a lot of acronyms, and sometimes people don't know what we're talking about. So, knowing who our generation is and then being able to articulate and slow down a little bit and think of who are the other people that are in the room that we're talking to. And again, really be aware of how we're impacting with our attitude, because it's important that we have that psychologically safe environment. So when we are moving forward with new products, not only is there an earlier adoption rate, it's not compliance driven, it's much more cooperation. When you have that psychologically safe environment, that's where, even when you're customer facing, if you have someone that is representing your organization and they're comfortable and they're confident in what they're talking about, all of a sudden, while they're the face of your company, they're putting their best foot forward, and that client that they're speaking to is going to open up a lot more. So again, you're going to get more information that you can just add and start to really look at the data governance that might be needed, and then also what are some of the analytics that maybe we're not looking at. And also, when we're talking customer focus, I've worked with many companies that collect information but they don't use it. So what's the point? When our people from our organizations are in the moment and focused, ultimately what can happen is they're creating an experience, right? People don't really care so much about things as much. They want that experience. How is it going to look? How much time is it going to take for me to learn? And we also need to focus on how much competition is out there. More and more startups are just popping up left and right. We have a lot of mergers in the last 2 years. When I think of Salesforce, when you think of Google, Facebook, how many things are happening so quickly with Amazon, even and Netflix. Think of streaming, Peacock, A plus C networks, so much content, right? There's so much competition. So when we're able to create a positive experience for our customers, that goes a long way. And ultimately that improves our NPS score, our CSAT score, and our VOC. If we don't do that, if those people that are our customers have a bad experience, there's that little thing called TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, and one tweet can end up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue by bad reputation. When we offer that great experience, that is where influencers post about what we've done for them, how we've helped them, how we've made them happy, we've made their life fun in a sense. Then that tweet or that TikTok is a positive. You're reaching sometimes millions of people in one little post, and ultimately you've increased market share. We have to embrace the change that gets us there, right? We have to be able to really depend on some more technology where we're able to let tech do its job so we can be the human side of the business. Sometimes people get shocked, right? Things with when I think of some of the robotic process automation, hyper automation that's coming out, more and more people are using, it's shocking how quickly things can be done. Shocking. Maybe someone's going to say, well, that's going to take my job away. That's why I ultimately went back to Dale Carnegie full time, because people kept thinking that the robots are going to take their job. And ultimately, they're not. They're there to help so you can then be more customer focused. And when you let go of the fact that, hey, I don't have to do this boring work, I can really think about how can I make my company better? How can I help my internal employees excel and really upskill to the next level? Ultimately, that's where people start to let go of their fear. They embrace the change. And then ultimately, that's where they start to accept and they are integrating the technology, and your adoption rate really goes a lot higher. Why do we even want to care about change, right? Ultimately, when we're looking at our clients, when we have that information in front of us, when we have that data, when we have those analytics, do we know everything about the person? Probably not. Do we have a way where we are able to kind of get a baseline of a few key things they might be interested in? You bet. So being able to have that as a tool is very key when it comes to that analytics and that data. And we're getting faster and faster at collecting it. And again, like I said, it's so important when we are client facing that we create that relaxed environment so our people from our organization can get more information from our customers, because we're building loyalty. And I don't know about you, but when I have a loyal customer, it's usually fun to talk to them. So then my morale is higher and I'm more engaged at work. I'm more excited to go on to that next call or that next task and see how can I do it better. And that makes it so much harder on competition. So it goes just from that adoption rate into, wow, I really like this. I can talk to people more. I'm the people side of it now, because it's so important that we don't forget the people part and that communication piece, because then we're able to respond in the moment. We can even add a little bit of extra when we're talking to our peers internally. Maybe we send them a thank you note for something that they did for us. With a customer, maybe we're giving them 5% off, or we offer free shipping the next time, because then we're going ahead and we're retaining that relationship, and we're really building a partnership rather than a burn and churn. When we embrace the change, this gives people the opportunity to actually upsell and cross sell a little bit more. I know many times when I was in the contact center space coming from Dale Carnegie, there's performance management software. And I would always think like, wow, this is really cool. They can integrate things from training right into the software. That person can log in, that rep can log in the morning, 5 minutes, do a quick little quiz on how do they interface with someone that's difficult, that's complained 2 or 3 times, and then ultimately pulling up that information and having that bot go ahead and explain what's their average cost per month, how many minutes are they using, how are they engaging with whatever that is, whatever that software is, or whatever that thing is that they're buying. How is their experience? All of a sudden, then I can start to cross sell on a few other things. So I would many times mention the performance management software. It's kind of a nice to have, right? So ultimately, based on me listening and understanding what some of the challenges in that space were, I cross sold. People were trained faster in short amounts of time, and ultimately call time was reduced. And as a result, they were able to upsell their customers. So it goes hand in hand. Ultimately, more revenue, right? So when you think about what we just covered here today, when you embrace changes in technology, in what ways would it help you focus on building more meaningful relationships? Just think about that. How would you be able to build more meaningful relationships? I know there's a chat option. Go ahead and do that if you want. think about it again, just technology is there to help us. It's not the enemy. It makes our job so much easier because we're able to do the fun stuff. I'll leave you with a parting thought from our founder, Dale Carnegie. He said, "We all have possibilities we don't even know about. We can do things that we don't dream that we can do." So, with that, thank you so much. Appreciate it. My name's Catherine Brinkman. I will go ahead and make sure you can get my contact information in the chat, and I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry you killed it on the time. So I appreciate you being
You
conscious
got it.
about that and getting us back on track. I'm sorry
Of
about the
course.
presentation as well. It looks like we're experiencing a few technical difficulties, but otherwise, I
No
think it was
problem.
phenomenal. I appreciate all the insight. It doesn't look like
Good.
our audience is here. Well, let me ask you one question before I let you go.
Sure.
What would be a good place for our audience to connect with you? Twitter, LinkedIn, email?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Awesome.
Yeah.
Sounds
And I'll
good.
get that for you. And then I'll also get you my email so you have that
Sounds like a
handy.
plan. I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing rest of the day, and wishing
Thank
you a
you.
happy